Hi, and welcome back. Today I'm going to share this video which is about hooking up my Uniden Bearcat 980 SSB to an RM Italy KL203P amp. And what I'm going to share is there's a lot of information on the internet on the correct wattage to have your radio set at for AM, and most of them are talking about a 1.5 to 2 watt dead key. And I, especially with the Bearcat, I don't agree with that, and I want to share some information why I don't. I hooked mine up leaving it to the factory setting, which is around 4 watts. And I'm gonna share with you why I did that. And am I right? I'm not sure, but if I did my math correctly, I should be fine. So let's get going here and let's talk about why I came to the decision I made. All right, trying not to get too boring here. I took some notes when I was watching some videos, reading some CB forums, and some of the things that stuck out to me, I have written down here. And I was trying to understand swing. You always hear swing. Oh, the more swing you have, the better the radio, the better it sounds. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that if you have a really high swing, you're probably over-modulating your radio, and that's why you're loud. And you're probably putting out spurious emissions. So, the first key term I was looking at was RIM, or the root mean square power. And that's the average power the radio produces, or that's your dead key. And then you hear a lot of talk about PEP, which is the peak envelope performance. And this is the highest power level that a radio can produce for a short period of time. And that's like when you whistle. That'll give you the peak envelope performance of your radio. And then an amplitude modulated signal is composed of 2 parts, which is the carrier, which is the dead key, and applied modulation, which is the swing. The relationship between the power levels of these 2 signals determines the percentage of modulation of that AM signal. So that's how you get the modulation of that signal. Now, from what else I've read, and I read this on several different sites, your goal for your modulation is to be between 80 and 100%. And they have that range because of the nature of the human voice. So you want to be between 80 and 100. If you get below 80, your voice is going to sound muffled. And then if you're above 100, your voice will sound distorted or choppy and loud. And that's because of a drop in the output power or efficiency. And if you get technical, that's because of an increase in the backward swing. And I'm not going to get into the backward swing, but a large backward swing is not good. And that's what you're doing when you're over-modulating. Now, the ratio you want is 4 to 1, and I read that in lots of spots. You want a 4 to 1 modulation, but that's using a scope, because a scope can show you forward and backward swing, but a watt meter that can show PEP will not show backward swing. So if you're using a watt meter, you want to have a 2 to 1 ratio. All right, now we're going to look at the amplifier. We want to hook an amplifier up to our radio. So now that we understand how a radio works, how it calculates watts, pep, dead key, modulation, the ratio we want to get. Now we want to take all that and hook it up to our amplifier. Thing to remember about an amplifier doesn't know what swing is. All an amplifier knows is input power. And that's all you're concerned about when you put that into your amplifier. How much wattage are you putting in there? And you want to keep it below 100% to keep your amplifier happy. If you feed too much power into the amplifier, your voice is going to be choppy, it's going to be distorted, and that's a sure way to kill your amplifier pretty fast. So what you need to do is calculate the output power of your radio so that you know the wattage that is going into the amplifier. And what I kind of discovered is what you want to do is talk in a normal tone of voice to observe the performance of your radio. And when you talk in a normal tone, it's usually going to be about 2/3 PEP or peak envelope performance. And with the RM Italy amp, the 203, it says not to put in any more than 10 watts. So if we can keep it under 10 watts, we're good to go. And then after you do that, and what I did to make sure my math was good, at the end I did a test with it with someone who was about 6 miles away, and I asked him, how do I sound? Is my voice distorted? Do I sound funny? And fortunately, he gave me a good report. I felt my amp. It wasn't warm after probably a 5-minute conversation. So, I think my math works out, and I think I'm good to go. So let me show you the math with my radio and what I arrived at. Now, by any means, I really don't have the proper equipment to be precise, but I do have a couple of power meters, and I think approximately be in the ballpark, which is acceptable and which is not. It's not going to be perfect. The first thing I measured was 4.5 watts dead key, and that seems too high to me. I think it's probably closer to 4, but like I said, I don't have a bird meter, so I'm probably not precise. And then I hooked up another meter I had that shows swing. So when I whistled into it, I was getting 11 watts peak envelope performance. So if we take those two together, I was getting 7 watts of swing. And from what I have read on this particular radio, you usually get between 5 and 6 watts of swing. So I'm kind of in the ballpark. I think my meter reads a little high. So that would make sense. All right, so let's do the math here. We want to observe the normal performance of our radio, how many watts it is. Now, I'm not always screaming or whistling into it, so I know it's not going to be 11 watts. So it's going to be somewhere in between 4.5 watts and 11 watts. So as we said earlier, it's going to be approximately 2/3 of the PEP, which was 11. So we're going to multiply that, and that's going to give us 7.3 watts. That's going to be the normal performance of my radio. Now, if we look at the specs on the 203P amp, it says you can put in between 0.5 to 10 watts. And what do we have here? we're averaging 7.3 watts. So we're well within that range of how many watts we can put in. All right, when I turn the amp on and I dead key the microphone, I get a reading of 48 watts. Now, this is where I think people get confused with the 4-to-1 modulation, and that's probably where they get putting 2 watts into it. But remember, the 4-to-1 is if you are using a scope. 2-to-1 would be if you're using a watt meter. So anyway, to calculate the PEP, I did not have a meter that went above 100 watts, so I couldn't use that to whistle into and see what the PEP was. So what I did is I looked at the reading without the amp on. The dead key was 4.5 watts and the PEP was 11 watts. So 11 was 2.44 times higher. It was higher than the 4.5 watts. So I just took 48 watts and multiplied it times the 2.44. So that was giving me a PEP of around 117.2. Kind of hard to write there, if you can read that. And then, like I said before, we want to find the average watts I'm using if I'm talking in a normal voice, which is 2/3 of PEP. So we take the 117 watts, we multiply that times 2/3, and we're getting, in a normal voice, we're using about 78.08 watts, which is well below the 100 watts on the 203 amp. All right, so if I did my math right and I understand swing correctly, I should be fine. I'm only, on a normal conversation, I'm only going to be averaging around 78 watts. Like this video, please click like. If you're new to my channel, I'd love if you subscribe to it. And thanks again to all the other subscribers that are already subscribed to me. I really appreciate it. And that's it for this time, and I will see you soon. Thanks.